வணக்கம். இந்த வீடியோல நம்ம ServiceNow developer environment from scratch. We'll start with the foundation, Node.js and npm. Then we'll set up Git for source code management. After that, we'll install and configure the ServiceNow SDK and verify the now SDK command. Finally, we'll install Claude Code and verify that it can be launched from our terminal. By the end of this video, you'll have a clean development environment ready for ServiceNow application development using Visual Studio Code. Let's begin with Node.js. Node.js provides the JavaScript runtime that allows us to run JavaScript-based developer tools directly from our computer. More importantly for our ServiceNow setup, Node.js comes with npm, the Node Package Manager. npm is what we'll use to install the ServiceNow SDK and other developer packages. So before installing the ServiceNow SDK, we need a working Node.js and npm environment. Next, install Node.js on Windows. After installation, don't immediately start installing the SDK. First, open a new PowerShell terminal and verify that Windows can find both Node.js and npm. We do that using two simple commands. Node-v displays the Node.js version, and npm-v displays the npm version. If both commands return version numbers, our Node.js foundation is ready. Now comes one of the most important lessons from this setup. Installing a tool and making the command available are two different things. Windows uses something called path to determine where executable programs are located. For example, Node.js may already exist on the computer, but if its installation directory isn't available through path, PowerShell may still say that the command is not recognized. So whenever you see the message, command is not recognized, don't immediately reinstall the software. First check whether the executable exists and whether its directory is included in path. Next is Git. Git is our source control system. When we're developing ServiceNow applications locally, our source code needs to be tracked, versioned, and eventually shared through a Git repository. After installing Git for Windows, the first command we use is git-version. If Windows reports that Git is not recognized, check the Git installation and path rather than changing your ServiceNow configuration. Once Git is available, we can configure our developer identity using git config with our name and email. Now we come to the most important part, the ServiceNow SDK. The ServiceNow SDK allows us to develop ServiceNow applications as source code in our local development environment. Instead of doing everything directly inside the browser, we can work with modern developer tools such as Visual Studio Code, JavaScript or TypeScript, npm, and Git. The SDK provides the command line interface that connects our local application development workflow with our ServiceNow instance. In simple terms, the SDK becomes the bridge between our local source code and ServiceNow. Now let's install the ServiceNow SDK. Because we're using npm, we can install the SDK package globally with this command. The package name is @ServiceNow/SDK. In my setup, this installed ServiceNow SDK version 4.1.1. During installation, npm may display warnings or notices. A warning is not automatically an installation failure. The important thing is to check whether npm completed successfully and then verify the actual SDK command. After installation, the next step is verification. We don't assume that an installation worked just because npm finished. We test the actual CLI. The first command is now-sdk --version. This should return the installed SDK version. We can then run now-sdk-help to see the available commands. In my environment, the SDK CLI returned version 4.1.1. Here's another real-world lesson from this setup. The SDK package was installed successfully, but PowerShell initially couldn't find now-sdk. Why? Because NPM's global executable directory wasn't available in path. On Windows, global NPM executables can be placed under the user's appdata roaming NPM directory. Once that directory was added to path and the terminal was restarted, now-sdk version worked correctly. This is a very common developer environment issue. The software is installed, but the shell doesn't know where to find it. Once the SDK CLI is working, the next logical step is authentication. The SDK needs credentials to communicate with a ServiceNow instance. We use the auth command to add credentials and assign an alias. The alias gives us a convenient name that we can use later with SDK commands. We can use now-sdk auth-list to see the configured credentials without exposing passwords. For a real project, use an appropriate authentication method and never put passwords or secrets directly into source code. Now we're ready to create the local application structure. We first create a dedicated project directory and move into it. Then we use the SDK init command. The init command creates an application structure suitable for source code development. This is where our ServiceNow project starts becoming a normal developer project, with files, configuration, source code, and dependencies that we can manage in Git. After initializing the application, we need to install its project dependencies. This is where npm comes back into the workflow. Running npm install reads the project's package configuration and installs the required packages. This creates the local dependency environment required to build the application. Once the dependencies are installed and our source code is ready, we can build the application. The SDK build command processes the local application and prepares the artifacts needed for installation on the ServiceNow instance. This creates the bridge between our source code development environment and the deployable ServiceNow application. After a successful build, we can install the application on our ServiceNow instance. The SDK install command packages the build artifacts and installs or updates the application on the target instance. We provide the authentication alias that we configured earlier. So our complete development flow is now becoming clear. Authenticate, initialize, develop, build, install. This is the foundation of a modern source code-based ServiceNow development workflow. The final developer tool I set up was Claude Code. Claude Code is a command line coding assistant that can work with a local project. After installation, the first thing we should do is verify the command with Claude-version. In my setup, Claude Code returned version 2.1.231. Just like Node.js and the ServiceNow SDK, Claude Code also depends on the Windows path being configured correctly. Once the command is available, we can launch Claude Code from our project directory and use it as part of our development workflow. Before we finish, always perform one final health check. We verify Node.js, then npm, then Git, then the ServiceNow SDK, and finally, Claude Code. This simple 5-command check tells us whether our development environment is ready. If any command returns not recognized, don't immediately reinstall everything. Identify which executable is missing and check its path configuration. That's one of the most valuable lessons from setting up a developer environment.
And this is the complete picture. Node.js gives us the runtime. NPM manages our JavaScript packages. Git manages our source code and versions. The ServiceNow SDK provides the development and deployment bridge to our ServiceNow instance. ClaudeCode can assist us while working with our local project. And Visual Studio Code becomes the central development environment where all of these tools come together. Once this foundation is ready, we're no longer limited to making changes manually in the browser. We can start treating ServiceNow application development like a modern software engineering project. So that's the complete setup journey, from installing Node.js and Git to configuring the ServiceNow SDK and ClaudeCode, and finally verifying the complete development environment. If you're starting your ServiceNow developer journey, don't underestimate the setup phase. Understanding how Node.js, NPM, Git, Path, the ServiceNow SDK, and your development tools work together will save you a lot of troubleshooting later. In the next video, we can take this environment and build a real ServiceNow application using the SDK, connect it to a PDI, and start developing directly from Visual Studio Code. If this video helped you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for the next step. Happy coding!